Hey, I'm Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and today we're going to do a real estate news breakdown. It's been a few weeks since I've done one of these. Today we're going to address an article written by Komo News, one of the local Seattle news outlets, and their article is titled "Bidding Wars for Seattle Area Homes Drop Sharply in Just 1 Year." And they drew on an article by Redfin, marked up here as well. Now, let's jump into a few of the quotes that I think are important to this article. So the first one here, this is according to the Redfin agent that was interviewed. Competition in the Seattle area has certainly slowed down since the second half of 2018. Last year, 5 out of 5 offers I submitted faced competition. Now it's 1 in 5. I'm definitely seeing this in the Seattle market as well. My experience is indicating the same thing. There's a lot less competition in the market than there was at the same time last year, and the numbers are really indicating that, obviously. The good houses, though, are still selling really quick, whereas some of the more average houses are taking a little bit longer to sell, and they're definitely not getting those multiple offers. So we're seeing multiple offers on the more exciting houses, more desirable houses, super move-in ready, but not on every house like we were seeing, or at least it seemed like we were seeing before. A couple of the other quotes I think are interesting. Nationally, 10.4% of buyers faced bidding wars last month in August, the lowest rate in 8 years, and down from a high of 59% last March, in March 2018. So last year was kind of the height of all this bidding war frenzy, not only locally in Seattle, but all over the US. I think that's pretty interesting, and it's the last quote I think is worth mentioning here is their last full paragraph here. The most competitive market nationally in August of this year was San Francisco, with 31% of offers written by Redfin agents on behalf of their home buying customers facing a bidding war. It's interesting that the stats are going to tell us that the drop-off in bidding wars is actually more dramatic in San Francisco than it was in Seattle, but they just had way more bidding wars on average than we did, and so the stats still a lot higher, but nationally Seattle's kind of more in the average. I want to transition over to the Redfin article that this article is based off of, because there's a little bit more data, and so let's jump over to that one here really quick. Cool, so let's pull from this Redfin article a few more juicy details, and then we can talk a little bit more about what I think's going on and get a little bit more of my commentary on it. So this Redfin article is going to interview their chief economist, Daryl Fairweather, and he's quoted saying this regarding the situation in bidding wars. Despite remaining near 3-year lows, mortgage rates have failed to bring enough buyers to the market to rev up competition for homes this summer. Recession fears have been enough to spook some would-be home buyers from making the big financial commitment of a home purchase. But assuming a recession doesn't arrive this fall or winter, consumers will likely adjust to the new normal of continued volatility in the stock and global markets, and the people who need and want to make a move will take advantage of the low mortgage rates. As a result, I still expect home buying competition to pick back up in the new year. I think that's a great thought. And it's interesting, mortgage rates are right now at almost record lows. They're not the lowest they've ever been, but they are pretty close to that. We saw mortgage rates go up dramatically last year, which definitely did not help the market. We were already kind of at a tipping point. Home prices were skyrocketing. Incomes really weren't keeping up. Then all of a sudden, interest rates went up, and affordability was so, I would say it was just on such thin ice that we saw that drop. And it was not the only factor that affected the home values in the Seattle area and around the US, but it was definitely one of the main contributing factors. And it's interesting to see interest rates down, and that might be helping keep the home prices where they're at. I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but home prices year over year from August to August are about the same. So we've more stabilized over the last year to where we were last year at the same time. So interesting fact. But before we kind of dive into my thoughts, I want to finish out here with a few of the different markets so you can have perspective on where Seattle is compared to some of the other ones. So in their study, they have this chart, and we'll put it up here on the screen. In San Francisco, 31% of offers made, and this is all by Redfin's data, so you can just keep that in mind. 31% of offers made in San Francisco were in competition, whereas last year in August, get this, 73.5% of offers made in San Francisco had competition. In San Jose, another really hot market, last year, 76.9% of offers faced competition, whereas this last year, 10.3%. So last month, 10.3% faced competition. Our neighbors to the south in Portland, Oregon, 43.9% last year faced competition, whereas this year, 9.1% faced competition. And last year, Seattle was at 37.8% in competitive offers. So if you think about it, really Seattle was still lower on this scale than some of these other places. And now we're at 9.4% last month that faced competition. So you'll see Seattle's on this actual chart isn't at the top, but they're near the top, as you'll see. But interestingly enough, they weren't the top, or even, they were actually lower on the chart last year than they are now, interestingly enough. So the Seattle market has definitely dropped off in competition, but so have all these other markets. We just started out a little bit lower. So it seems like a lot of these places are seeing some similar numbers. So now let's talk about what I think. Get a little bit more of my thoughts, because I like to talk about my thoughts here. I'll share a few stats here really quick, and this is as of September 5th stats in the MLS. So I bet the next few days I might see a little adjustment in this. And if you want to know what the market's doing, watch my Seattle real estate market update coming up in a few days. Anyways, last year, home prices in August, $740,000 and median sales price for residential homes in Seattle. This year, it's $730,000 median sales price at this point, which is down 1.4% year over year. And that's looking closer and closer to the break-even number that I keep talking about on my market updates. I do still think by the end of the year, we're going to be up year over year versus down. The other interesting stats, I think, that go along with this article, so we are seeing fewer new listings on the market than we did last year. At the same time, we also have 12% more homes for sale. So there's still a little bit of a log jam of inventory, if we want to call it a log jam. There's 2 months of supply on the market. And last year, there was a little bit less supply in August. Now, interestingly, the supply numbers at this 2 months, still super hot buyer's market, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, we're getting multiple offers on properties at about a 10% rate here in Seattle. And so I wouldn't say that we're, what's the word? It's not like this market is imploded, but we're definitely more stabilized market. You're not seeing the frenzied pace that we were seeing in the past. And the last thing I think that's important is the stats. It's just the list to sales price average. So last year we were seeing numbers in that 5 to 6% over the asking price. Sometimes we were seeing closer to 10% in a given month. Now we're seeing right about the asking price. The average and median both were just under the full asking price in Seattle. So really all this is correlated to a little bit more equity in the buying and selling negotiations. Still, the sellers have a lot more leverage as home prices are tending to still stick right by those asking prices. But when you don't have the competition, if a home sits for a few weeks on the market, now a seller might be a little bit more willing to work with you if you're the buyer. And if you are the seller, you test the market for 3 weeks and nobody's paying that price, it is an indication that maybe you're just above the market. So I think the other piece of that stat and why we're seeing homes selling for 100% of the asking price is because we are seeing price reductions as well. So there are homes that are sitting for 2, 3, 4 weeks, which in the Seattle market is a long time to then see a price reduction and then a quicker sale. And I've seen this with a few of my listings where clients wanted to push the price, and we pushed the price at the beginning. And then when we made that initial price drop maybe down to where we had talked about like, yeah, this is probably definitely going to get it sold. Let's hope they're going to pay this. Once we dropped it down to that range, the homes sold pretty quickly. So it's really important, I guess my thoughts on this, it's really important if you're the seller to be pricing your house appropriately and to really be, I think honest with yourself about what your house is worth. There is, as a seller, this tendency to have a little bit of an emotional attachment to the house, which makes sense. I mean, I have an emotional attachment to my house as well as a homeowner. But when you're selling, it really needs to be a little bit more objective on the price because the buyers don't have that emotional connection that you have. And there's no real way to manufacture it. And so when a buyer's looking at your house, they're going to compare it with the other houses that are for sale around. And inevitably, if your house is overpriced, above the price of these other homes that are in the similar category, your home's not going to sell. And that's definitely the case right now. Now, when there's more competition and less homes on the market, now you have a frenzy and people are kind of like, oh my gosh, I just need a house. But that's really not going on. So sellers, it's definitely important to price your house accurately. If you're a buyer, just know going into it, you have a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more negotiating power if there's inspections, things like that. But you really don't have a ton. It's not like there's 10 months of inventory and everybody's just freaking out and they really need to sell their house or they're going to get foreclosed on. That's not the situation either. So I really think we have a little bit more of a level playing field, which in my opinion is a lot more refreshing. Not scrambling around like I was for the last few years when the market was at its kind of peak frenzied state. There were times it's like, oh, we got to write this offer right now at 9 o'clock at night because and the seller has to accept it in the next 2 hours, or somebody else might make an offer. It was a little crazy. So I do appreciate the slowdown, and I think it's better in general for the market and for the people that are in this process of buying and selling. Anyways, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you found this market update informational, helpful. If you did, which I know you did, please consider subscribing to my channel and dropping a comment down here below. And if this was helpful to you and you think that somebody else might benefit from the same information, please share it and help get the word out. We'll talk soon.